How's that for the simplest and shortest stream intro ever? Well, folks on YouTube can always use DVR mode just to catch what they missed with this discussion. What is up, everybody? This is Jay, aka MultimediaJay. Alerts are paused, and pretty much all the fancy stuff is shut off for this discussion. This is literally, I have a thing in OBS that I just set to 30 FPS, so it's not 60 like the game stream. So YouTube 30 FPS, it's called splash screen only, because literally it's just me and the splash screen. And this doesn't need anything fancy anyways. It's just a simple discussion, and all the fancy stuff that I could turn on with this is pretty much turned off at this point. I tried discussing the situations regarding my recently deceased cousin in a gaming stream for ESO last go round. But the problem that I kept running into was that it was like it was trying to be two different streams at once. I couldn't really get into any serious discussion on the whole situation with my cousin while playing ESO. Especially, basically I'm setting up an in-game memorial to the guy. One of my characters is going to be inspired by his love for everything Scottish. And I'm taking one of my castles, the Daggerfall Overlook, and turning it into the Scotsman's Overlook. So it's going to be a lot rougher and more rustic and stuff like that. It's going to be, that kind of a setup. It's going to change, its character, so to speak, versus the Panther Fang castle that my main character has as his place nowadays. And I actually bought another player house in ESO this evening with part of the crowns for my annual subscription for one of my other characters too. So there's going to be like player houses that fit the lore of my various characters in Elder Scrolls Online. So let's talk about this, because the more I tried doing this as a gaming stream, the less it worked. And it felt like the stream was just being two different streams at once, and it was pretty awkward. And interesting, the timing of all of this, that I'm having this discussion right after President Biden signed that executive order that has created a pseudo-vaccine mandate for the United States. I think it could have gone further. So I think it's going to be a fight to even get the results that President Biden's looking for because of the state of OSHA, who would be enforcing the fines for every violation, $14,000 each. So I think, I'll tell you right now, the hard left-wing media is going to be criticizing President Biden for this, because they're going to say he didn't go far enough because of the involvement of OSHA in enforcing it. So watch for that in the headlines on, like Occupy Democrats or something like that. At some point, I'm telling you right now, some liberal commentators at some point are going to be criticizing President Biden for the way he's handling this, despite it being the most action we've seen from the White House in terms of pushing people towards getting vaccinated pretty much ever. I guarantee you some liberal commentator out there somewhere is going to say that he's not going far enough. But it's very interesting that President Biden is doing this right as all this is going on with my family. So here's the situation, and here's what happened. My cousin was about my age. I thought he was younger than me, but actually he was a little older. So he was like early 40s. So he's close to my age, but older. I thought he was younger for some reason, but no, he was actually older. My cousin, he passed away from COVID after being hospitalized and on machines for pretty much the last month of his life. And most importantly, he was unvaccinated. I'm concerned because his social media hasn't been memorialized over on Facebook just yet. And I'm wondering if his wife might actually try to scrub details from the story. So I actually print screened a few key messages regarding his final days and him not being vaccinated. So if his widow did try to clean up his profile to hide that, I've got evidence that she did that. But the problem is we're dealing with anti-vax culture in the South. And there's these, depending on where you go, you'll see anywhere from outright anti-vaxxers to people kowtowing to them. And there's a couple of ways that people kind of cave to anti-vaxxers. One of them is by talking about COVID as though it was still the year 2020. So they'll say, oh, terrible disease, terrible this, terrible. They'll do everything they can to not mention the vaccine. So, and then of course you have the stuff with all the ivermectin crap that's been going on, things along those lines. My cousin was not involved in that, not that I know of, but there were some snake oil folks swooping into his comments when him and his wife got sick with this thing. Now, hey, you taking ivermectin? I hope the doctor gives him ivermectin. What about hydroxychloroquine? It's like, ugh, Fox News fringe crap all over again. Give me a break. So I guess the best way I can describe the context of all this is my family is all over the map geographically. Myself and my dad were from New England. Got some relatives in mid-Atlantic region, some relatives on the West Coast, some relatives in Florida and the Deep South. And we all think differently, of course, to go along with the way things go in various parts of the country. So as predicted, myself and my dad, I agree with my dad, and he agrees with me the most on this whole matter. It's not just a loss in terms of your heart, it's also a loss in terms of your head. It's not just about your feelings, it's about the objective facts of what happened and balancing the two out. You don't ignore one because of the other. And this is actually a good way to go through life in general, is to not let your heart get ahead of your head, not let your head get ahead of your heart, etc. Not let your feelings get ahead of your thoughts, or your thoughts get ahead of your feelings. As a mix of both is actually probably the best way to do things in this world. Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. And at the same time, don't be an insensitive clod with no feelings at all, because you're always trying to, overthink things. But the situation with my cousin was that he wasn't vaccinated, and he was medically vulnerable because of some things going on outside of this. And what happened with my cousin is exactly what the experts have been warning about since day one. You want to try and stop the spread of this thing because you don't want to accidentally pass it off to someone that's medically vulnerable who will end up hospitalized or dead from it. Even if you have mild or moderate symptoms or no symptoms. It's not, you may not have to worry about it, but that doesn't mean the person next to you who you give it to won't have to worry about it. That's the randomness of COVID-19, and this is why I've had the same two rules throughout this entire pandemic. You don't know who has this thing, and you don't know what this thing is going to do to you when you get it. I was one of those people that wanted the vaccine as soon as possible. Dig around this channel, and you're going to find out that I was very upset when Governor Lamont simplified the vaccine rollout after several groups of people like school teachers, first responders, medical personnel, etc. got their shots first. Essential workers lost their place in line, and I was furious. Fortunately, President Biden in the federal effort did a pretty good job making up for essential workers losing their place in line. But if I could have gotten vaccinated before March, or in March instead of May or whatever, I would have done that. May or April or March or April or whatever. I would have gotten vaccinated as soon as possible because I recognized the vaccine for what it was. For the dark year known as 2020, for the year that we know as 2020, we got to experience what the world was like before we developed a lot of our modern treatments. And the most you could do was just try what you had and cross your fingers and hope that you never got it, or that you wouldn't die from it if you did. This was interestingly enough, 2020 was a great example of the world that the anti-vaxxers would love to see happen. Nobody gets vaccinated, and people are trying to do literally everything else except use vaccines to combat illnesses. We got a little taste of that, and it sucked. Social distancing being the only tool we had, lockdowns being the only tool we had, wearing masks being the only tool we had. It was, I don't know if anyone is actually nostalgic for 2020. I'm curious why. But once the vaccine came onto the scene, 2021, even if the COVID nonsense continued, looked like a better year than 2020. The vaccine was something I very much looked forward to and I was on the phone with my doctor, and I'm on the phone. This is the 21st century. Yeah. Anyways, I used the messaging system that is available for phones and internet, so to speak, to talk with my healthcare provider about scheduling 2 shots of Moderna, and got those 2 shots of Moderna. My reasons for getting Moderna was because we're largely business related. My rationale was there was no Johnson & Johnson yet. So I was like, Pfizer versus Moderna. Moderna is a smaller company, more focused on mRNA technology. They have more to lose if they get the shot wrong, versus Pfizer, who has Viagra, various other pharmaceuticals, other products under their belt. So it wasn't the end of the company if they got the shot wrong. And we've already seen other big pharma companies have problems with shots, not getting shots wrong, like Merck. 2 failed vaccine candidates never made it out of trials. So I didn't want a situation where, as much as Pfizer was bigger and had more brand recognition, the vaccine is actually a BioNTech thing from over in Germany, and Pfizer is kind of part of the American rollout of it, so to speak, because who the heck over here is going to know what BioNTech even is? So a little bit of brand recognition. A little bit of brand recognition. A lot of people here in America know what Pfizer is, and there's some people I knew who wanted Pfizer, specifically because they recognized the brand name. So I went out of my way, make sure I got my shots. Big side effects, whoop-de-doo. Schedule some time off from work. I have a hard enough time scheduling ample vacations anyways because I get a little too into what I do. It's a year after year after year problem for me. So the last couple of years have been pretty experimental. Besides traditionally taking a week off and stuff like that, I've also experimented with 3-day weekends, little mini vacations tied to Monday holidays, little things along those lines. But yeah, so when I got absolutely clobbered by the side effects of dose 1 of Moderna, and by clobbered I mean it was like a really bad winter bug, but what worried me the most was the nausea. I didn't want to throw up in the middle of work because that would be a symptom that would get me kicked out and have to kicked out on, on quarantine. So very, very concerned about that. So oh, wow, this really hits you hard. And then there was the pain too, but I was kind of jinxed because I'd received a tetanus booster within the same year. So I was already used to arm pain and stuff like that, but couldn't go past 8 o'clock. But yeah, got both shots of Moderna, already planning when to get the booster. If the timetable changes, I'll get it sooner. Otherwise, we'll be dealing with that around a little after New Year's. But at the same time, though, seeing people who just want to be stupid going and turning what should be fun outdoor events into nobody's wearing masks, nobody's doing anything, they're pretending COVID is over until, look at the numbers a week later. It really is no issue for me with all the, sheltering in place we've been doing and, being introverts and making being an introvert cool and stuff like that we've been doing. It is, it's no problem for me to avoid snooty, snooty, arrogant people who are going around without masks, or parents whose kids aren't masked. I mean, nothing like dead giveaways that some rando that I run into in Walmart is somebody I should stay far, far away from and have nothing to do with. And how about the people on the internet, of course? We talked about this so many times, who are dumb enough to put where they work, so I know where not to get a job. Don't work on this shift, don't work for this company, don't work for blah, blah, blah. Yay for brand damage. But it's no problem for me to just continue being more of a reclusive introvert until dose number 3. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. I got so much to do in ESO, so much to do with tech tinkering, what little we can do in this broken tech market that there is. But it's not an issue. But that's the culture I live in. The culture my cousin lived in was not this. I talked about it and did some, showed why my methodology to convince my folks to get vaccinated. But that's all she wrote for the New England folks. It's a different story in the South, as we've been seeing on YouTube videos of the Arkansas governor getting heckled at one of his vaccination rallies and whatnot, or even President Trump at that Alabama rally. I got the vaccine, it's good, go get it. And everybody starts booing him instantly and he caves. Just goes to show the monster is completely out of the monster cage, and even Trump can't do anything about it. Yeah. What a monster we've created, huh? A monster of misinformation, a monster of militant, organized stupidity. But at least these people are bombastic enough to out themselves as being publicly stupid as they are, so that the rest of us can be like, I'll stay at home then. You guys go ahead and get yourself sick. I'll start having fun again when you folks are all shut up because you're all in the hospital or whatever. And sarcastic and schadenfreude is sounding, but what do you think happened? The parts of the country where people are going on and on about this, that, and the other, the vaccine, blah, 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 blah. Well, the numbers speak for themselves. I've been watching them all summer since Delta started making the rounds. A little further back, too. COVID Act now aggregates a lot of data from the CDC, and and CDC and other folks too. They keep a map of risk levels for who's orange, who's red, etc. And this was something that I was using before the transmission map became a thing. And so the pattern that Delta has plunged the U.S. into is that the Northeast routinely does better than the entire rest of the country numbers-wise, whether it's infections per 100K, cases per 100K, or the infection rate, or what have you, or even just the simple fact of when our states turn red from some kind of outbreak of Delta somewhere, they don't stay red because we're more vaccinated and people have better attitudes towards public health than they would in the Deep South. But that's not the culture my cousin lived in. No. As recently, as a friend of the family down there, he just died a year or two ago. Anti-everything. Hated doctors, hated the government, he believed every conspiracy theory there was. I mean, this is the kind of guy that Jen Psaki would do a total call out at one of her White House meetings. And this is before the pandemic. He thought that the vapor coming out of planes was something from the government to brainwash you and all that lovely stuff. Woo! Yeah, he had quite a bit of an influence on some of my cousins. My guess is that if he hadn't passed away from whatever it was that he died from a year or two ago, he probably would be a casualty of Delta. Not a doubt in my mind. This guy would have been like, I ain't gonna change the way I do things, and that would have been what landed him in the hospital. And his underlying conditions would have finished him off. But yeah, the more and more that I follow this whole situation with Delta and the pandemic, the more I realize it's really about choosing your friends wisely. And I just remember growing up back in the 90s. Choosing your friends wisely was about don't hang out with the wrong crowd in school so that they don't get you arrested or something. So don't get like busted for drugs or something. Don't have bad friends in school. That's what choose your friends wisely meant to me in the 1990s when I was growing up. Today, you want to choose your friends wisely because having the wrong friends exposes you potentially to a deadly virus, or gives you the wrong attitude towards its vaccine that leaves you a sitting duck to the most take-no-prisoners variant of it yet. My cousin wasn't an anti-vaxxer. He just hung out with the wrong crowd. And I know he wasn't vaccinated because I found out there was an algorithm glitch and that Facebook wasn't showing me his posts for some reason. So I fixed that in a hurry, made him a favorite see first, whole 9 yards. Then I played some catch up. Found out all he'd been through. Last couple of years have been crap for him. Medical things here and there. And then he caught COVID. His wife got it first, and then he got it from her. And you know how if you get diagnosed with cancer or something, the doctor wants you sitting down before you receive the news with that kind of sinking feeling? That was probably what was going through his head as he posted about it. And there were some people that were like, did you get vaccinated? The guy would be like, hey, did you get vaccinated? And he would be like, subscribers only. All right. He's like, hey, did you get vaccinated? And he's like, he gave it away. I mean, he dodged the issue. So he was intimidated from talking about whether he was vaccinated or not. He dodged the issue until someone put him on the spot long enough to where he let it slip. He said, look, I don't think it really matters at this point. Don't you think that if I had gotten... Don't you think I saw his video? This has nothing to do with whatever you're talking about. A different guy. No cancer involved. But this... So, he comes out and he says, look, if I'd gotten the shot, don't you think I wouldn't be in this situation? That's what gave it away. So he wasn't an anti-vaxxer. He was just suckered by them. And he spent the last month of his life hooked up to machines. Went downhill very, very quickly. Got to the point where he could barely move. Wound up in the hospital, wound up in the ICU. And then he went through the roller coaster of better, worse, on the machine. You know, on the machine with the settings turned up. On the machines with the settings turned up. I saw his video. Does that mean that the game stream I did last go around? Yeah. Yeah, well, the reason why, up and down until we finally got the news that, you know, he had died from it. Hey, here's the thing. One of the reasons why I've decided to, you know, memorialize him through some of my ESO involvement is because he was into video games too. And interestingly enough, he was one of the few cousins in my family that in this world of internet gaming has ever actually played anything with me. We played Pirates of the Burning Sea together, if anyone's ever played that. It's a MMO. It used to be a Sony MMO, but it's been spun off to independent owners for many years since being taken off of Sony's service, the same service that used to run EverQuest, by the way. It's a historical RPG about being a ship captain in the Mediterranean. So it was kind of like an ancestor of Sea of Thieves from the late 2000s, but it ran on low-end hardware by the early 2010s. And so he had a low-end computer, and we played, and we got some ships and stuff. And we played as British captains. We could have just as easily have been, have played on the pirate side too. But so yeah, it's a cool game and stuff. I actually reinstalled it the other night just to check it out again and just notice how much it has aged. So this sort of thing. Let's see. Who's this? This doesn't work properly. We'll fix this here then. Boom. Not a smart idea. Yeah. See, what was that? That's a bot. Yeah, that was a bot. The wonderful world of sock puppets, ladies and gentlemen. But either way, this whole situation with this guy didn't have to happen. And what it all boiled down to, quite simply, was he just had the wrong friends. He had the wrong friends. And so the wrong friends gave him the wrong attitude. And I guess this is something that people need to learn about sometimes in this world. Bad ideas lead to bad things. You know, your ideas, whatever your beliefs are and everything, doesn't stay in some kind of, ether out there. It comes into the real world. If you have bad ideas about something, it's going to translate into bad actions or bad things happening to you. This can even go back to when we talk about the 1990s with my stepmother and others warning, hey, don't hang out with the wrong crowd in school, because hanging out with the wrong crowd got you arrested, got you with some kind of illness, got you with some other stuff. Bad things would happen to you if you had bad ideas and hung out with bad friends. So it's just, yeah. My dad, well, you know what the hardest part about all of this is? The hardest part about all of this is in this day and age of social media, when these things happen. In this day and age of social media, with these things happening, it's just hard when your brain just doesn't click. Because intellectually they're gone, but you can see on their social media that just 2 weeks ago they were smiling for the camera or something, or in this case, like 2 months ago, I should say, they were smiling for the camera. Nothing was wrong. And so to have someone, it's probably worse for, people that lose their lives in car accidents and stuff, because just you have a situation where you can't. Actually, I went through that. We actually had somebody end up in a tractor trailer accident and die in a tractor trailer accident trying to get to work. And it was a shocker more than anything else, because the guy was perfectly fine a day or two ago, and then boom, gone. So, anyways, just want to say one thing for these botters that are trying to bring Twitch's drama over to YouTube. YouTube doesn't do things the same way as Twitch. Number one, you'll get banned. Number two, YouTube doesn't have the same rules as Twitch when it comes to chat moderation. I'll deal with stuff, of course, but it's not the same, it's not going to have the same effect here, even if I was the kind of person that was bothered by that instead of just rolling my eyes at yet another botter. But anyways, there's nothing much to this stream tonight anyways. We're just talking about a recently departed cousin. So to bring this stuff into my chat when we're trying to do something like this says a lot about the kind of person you are, more so than anything else. Give me a break. But I have low expectations for humanity in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, if I can think of it, someone out there is probably trying to do it, no matter how sick and twisted and stupid it is. You can call me, a glass half empty kind of person, but I prefer pleasant surprises over nasty surprises. But yeah. ScotsmanJosh, that's the name he went by on Twitch. I know that there might be someone on YouTube is going by that. I don't know if it was inspired by the structure of MultimediaJay or anything, but it's the thing where, name tied to an interest. I don't know if he was inspired by what I did. I know he knew about my online media involvement. He showed up mostly in Twitch streams. He see me playing an RPG and like, what game is this, lol? Because he was into that kind of stuff too. If he had a better, if things were better for him, even before COVID and whatnot, if things are better for him and he had a better computer, he probably would have gotten into ESO. Probably played a Nord and stuff like that. And that's one of the things I was looking for with the Archibald Campbell character, is to kind of be like, the kind of character where he'd be like, what game is this? Or maybe the character he'd make if he played ESO. Plus, I need a tank warden. Anyways. But I guess, see, the thing is, the family's very split apart. He was one of the cousins who brought, who crossed that distance the most, so to speak. He talked to me a lot on social media. We talked about a few things here and there. We were probably in touch more than, I've certainly heard from him more than I've heard from a lot of my other cousins out there, even in this day and age of social media. But the most important thing is I don't think anybody's ever tried to play an online game with me before. I think it's because, too, our gaming is all over the place for those of us that actually play video games. I'm over here playing ESO on PC. I don't know if anybody else in the family would even be interested in ESO, or if they'd have a computer to run it. I mean, if my uncle wanted to get into video games in his 70s, he'd be trying to play ESO on a laptop, I think, because he was always a big fan of laptop. I think he said he had a desktop, though, for stuff. But yeah, we've talked about this kind of stuff in family discussions before. But yeah, I pretty much have grown up as the lone gamer, and I've been the lone gamer for quite some time. Or if people play games, they don't play the same kind of games that I do. So it's just been kind of a lonely, existence, so to speak, with that kind of stuff. But ScotsmanJosh bridged the gap more than anybody else in the family. Very respectable guy. And he loved all things Scottish. Now, I'm not into the Scotland thing the way he was. I guess what happened was he found out that we have ties back to Clan Campbell in Scotland. And if we dig back even further, the Plantagenet dynasty, from medieval England and whatnot, and all the politics involved in England and Scotland in that day and age. But from that day forward, he was Mr. Scotland. He loved Scotland. He loved everything about Scotland. I don't think he ever went to Scotland. But I always crack jokes about, hey, did you tick off the neighbors with the bagpipes? Because he did the whole 9 yards. He wore the tartans and the kilts and went to the Scottish festivals. Seems like he had a lot of friends at those festivals too. I mean, that totally became his hobby, so to speak, and a pretty big one in a way. But Yeah, some of the family was making fun of him for being Mr. Scotland, for being so obsessed with having any ties to Scotland whatsoever. But I can understand where he was coming from, and I did understand where he was coming from. At the time he was getting all into Scotland and everything, I was getting into the German heritage in my family and the Reformation and Lutheranism. You know, I was listening to Johann Sebastian Bach and, you know, the hymns of, what's his name, Pastor Stark or whatever it was, forgot the name. But, you know, reading about what the Missouri Synod has done in the United States and the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod and whatnot. So, and just the whole, you know, the whole ethnic side of, you know, churches and stuff like that. So folks from Germany and Scandinavia, my family also has ties back to Denmark as well. So going through all of this history and whatnot, we both were history nerds. We're using Ancestry and other family tree sites and stuff. And folks were joking on Facebook about how you're kind of, you know, getting similar to each other, just in very different styles and whatnot. I'm not into the whole Scotland thing. I mean, Scotland's kind of cool. You know, Scotland's kind of cool, actually. You know, the whole rugged mountain, you know, rugged Highlander kind of thing. It's pretty cool. But it's just not my thing, though. I mean, I'm the kind of person that'll just stay zonked out playing ESO all the time. I don't know. Maybe my cousin was less of an introvert than I was. I really don't know. But great guy. Great guy, and probably one of the friendliest cousins I've ever had. It was definitely an honor to have a guy like him as my cousin. You know? And bridging the geographical gap to play some games from time to time, nobody else has done that, actually. So I was worried about him just like everybody else was, even though I'm half a, you know, country away, because he's, you know, great guy and whatnot. You know, maybe we believe different things because of the whole Trump-Biden thing in the 2020 election. And maybe, you know, I have some angry relatives who are very angry anti-vaxxers that I don't speak to. You know, that I don't speak to down in that neck of the woods. And they don't speak to me either. But I really don't care what kind of tribal division and whatnot has crippled Americans' ability to speak to each other in a civil manner in the last couple of years. Bottom line, he was my cousin. I give a darn. Discussion over. And this is the part where people are going to say, oh, you have an axe to grind, then you and that vaccination thing. Yeah, well, he'd still be here if he was vaccinated. He wasn't the first loss this family has had because of this vaccination political crap either. We had another death in the family months ago. My aunt became a widow because of the UK variant, actually. She certainly was like, get your shots. So it doesn't just have to be me. It doesn't just have to be Jay, the New England guy, the New England liberal. It does not just have to be Jay that's saying that now. That's true, though. Now, I read somewhere that there are 3 Americas: Blue America, Red America, and Trump America. Red America needs to make a comeback. A sizable chunk of my family is vaccinated, including some Republicans. It doesn't need to be the case that COVID-19 is any kind of conserva plague. The South doesn't have to be ripped up about stuff. You know, it just shows the kind of identity crisis within the Republican Party that we're even having these conversations in the first place, because the vaccines, especially Moderna, from a company based in Massachusetts, American company. This is American entrepreneurialism and capitalism. This is entrepreneurialism and capitalism in America at its best. We came together and we made this happen. And in between working all the overtime and being stressed all the time, healthcare workers, some of them anyways, are lauding what we've made with this vaccine. And in today's day and age, with the vaccine and everything, it's pretty darn good. even from a cost perspective. When it comes to cost. I saw the billing for my 2 Moderna shots, $40 versus thousands for monoclonal antibodies before insurance. Because that's a newer thing, and maybe the R&D costs aren't paid off or something. Speaking of insurance, I'm wondering when the insurance, even if President Biden hadn't signed that, even if President Biden hadn't come out with that order that over 100 employees, you got to either be vaccinated or submit to weekly testing. I think even if President Biden hadn't done that, the insurance industry would have. Because at what point do you think the insurance folks would have wanted to stop paying for people's medical bills when they know and can produce evidence that they snubbed the vaccine? And so by skipping the vaccine, the only way they could fight COVID if they were hospitalized was to resort to more expensive treatments. So I wonder about that with the Deep South, because some of the anti-vax governors are pushing monoclonal antibodies and trying to set up clinics in the South. Problem is, if we're talking monoclonal antibodies for everybody, because it's what Trump got, there's a lot of logistical problems with that. So the window of time for monoclonals is very short. You got to get it while your symptoms are mild to keep them from progressing. So you just imagine if you're in the South and you hated the vaccine and you're getting COVID symptoms, how do you think that's going to go? Here's how I imagine it. First, you wonder if it's even COVID in the first place. You think, maybe I got seasonal allergies. Maybe there's a cold going around. This will probably get really wild during flu season. Second, by the time your symptoms are getting to the point where you're starting to think that it's COVID, then you have to get tested. The test results have to come back. And so in all of this time that you're not jumping on this, if you're not a Joe Rogan who gets tested quickly and then throws the kitchen sink at it, which included monoclonal antibodies for him, by the way. If you're not somebody like that, thanks, Erwin. If you're not somebody who's like that, that closes the window a lot when you can get that treatment done. Now, if the southern states are setting up these clinics for monoclonals in lieu of vaccine clinics for a monoclonal rollout, you got people rushing over there because there's more cases of Delta and whatnot. You're going to sit in line. The clock's going to tick. How long do you want to sit in line? And what about the logistical things that keep people from getting vaccinated, like they couldn't get away from work for a certain amount of time or whatnot? So I just imagine logistically, if the South goes crazy with monoclonals, there's, number one, going to be higher costs. And what's that going to do to the state economy if the states are, to the state budgets, if the states are trying to pay for all that? Secondly, the logistics is a nightmare. Third, you got to be a nervous wreck and catch this before it gets worse. It's not a preventative measure. It's something where you know you have it and you're trying to keep it from getting worse. And now you're racing everybody down there who didn't want to get the vaccine. So I imagine these places will end up like the old school state-run emissions test centers here in Connecticut once upon a time before it was privatized. Long lines. And how long do you want to sit in line in your car driving up to these places? And it's just like, yeah. The logistics side of it's going to take a lot of work, but I think even if the logistics were perfectly fine in the southern states, the cost is the biggie here. So the numbers, I'm not so sure about the numbers on that versus just preventing it in the first place or getting it to where, if you get this thing, it's basically like the sniffles instead of anything serious. But yeah, my cousin was unvaccinated. That's why I think he's not with us anymore. Because, and it wasn't because he was an anti-vaxxer, one of these people that's screeching at school board meetings. Very mellow guy. He was around the wrong people. And based on the way he responded when he first got infected, and he was talking about it on social media, and people were like, "Hey, did you get your vaccines?" Somebody was probably intimidating him out of getting his shots. I don't care who it was, but as far as I'm concerned, they're the lowest scum of the earth. I don't want to meet them. I don't want to even know who it was. They can live with the results of what they've done. It's pathetic. Because I'll tell you, there is some other cousins I have who have been hit very hard with this, because never mind, being halfway across the country and playing a few online games with them and talking RPGs with them and stuff like that and talking a few times on social media. These are people that were seeing him every Christmas and stuff. They're just like, it's even worse for them. It's bad for me because, I'm still getting used to him being gone in the first place. I'll just 2 clicks away. There it is. Smiling for the camera, going to his Scottish festivals, doing all his stuff. It's almost like you expect him to, this has to be a dream. Someday, the post is going to pop up and we're going to hear from him again. But no, it's not going to happen. So, and this is the thing. No matter what your attitude about COVID, you don't want to be selfish, because this virus doesn't care if you're selfish or not. That's why the whole not getting vaccinated thing is not a personal choice, because the virus doesn't play that way. So you're talking Delta, which has upgraded transmissibility versus its ancestors. This thing doesn't care what you think. It doesn't care about your petty little feelings. It's going to spread wherever it can spread. This thing doesn't care what you think of it. So that's the thing. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to say that this is a personal choice and we can agree to disagree on the vaccine thing or the pandemic or whatnot. The truth of the matter is that we don't have that luxury. Not with what's involved here and the way it gets around. And that's why, in light of this and other stuff, my family in general. So here's the other track. Here's the rest of the track record with it. People have had brushes with it. I haven't, and I'm going to do everything I can to stay that way, despite being vaccinated and despite going for boosters when they become available, and I'm eligible for them. I have another cousin who works in healthcare. She had the regular version of this and then alpha later. So the natural immunity in the pre-vaccine era that she got from the original infection didn't help, and she got reinfected again, and that's when my aunt's husband got it and passed away from it. She had to move back in with her mom for some reason and whatnot, and she brought COVID with her. But it's all an object lesson, though. Just because the scientists and the doctors and folks like Fauci and Walensky and whatnot are flying at the seat of their pants trying to figure this thing out doesn't mean they're not putting in the darn work for it. And I happen to think that guy at the medical updates at the White House, the guy who MCs that, is a little wooden himself. Like, he probably wouldn't be on camera if it wasn't for these updates and stuff like that. Now, he's the guy that's not Dr. Fauci or not Dr. Walensky. He's the very, stiff guy in the middle. So, it's the government. I don't expect, high Hollywood production value from them. These are politicians and government workers we're talking about here. Come on now. But yeah, so you don't have the luxury of saying, it's just my choice. No, that doesn't work. Not with this pathogen. This is also, by the way, why the vaccine hesitant are not neutral in this matter. Since the whole revised guidance and whatnot, some data has popped up pointing to a possibility that even if someone does get a breakthrough infection, they clear up faster, and the viral load that affects the contagion drops down faster than if someone's unvaccinated. I mean, people are just going over these numbers with a fine-tooth comb and stuff, trying to get a bead on things, because that's what it's going to take to move past all of this and figure out how we can move forward from it. But there's not a doubt. I don't think my cousin was surrounded by anti-vaxxers. I don't think my cousin was surrounded by him, but I think there were a lot of vaccine hesitant folks that might have gotten him thinking along the same way as they did. So maybe someone wasn't overtly angry about the vaccine. They just had some other reason why they weren't going to get it. They were nervous about something or something along those lines. The truth of the matter is, though, for the vaccine hesitant, you're not neutral. If you're vaccine hesitant, look, this vaccine's been in circulation for about 9 months now. If you've been vaccine hesitant long enough to have a vaccine hesitancy baby, as the Twitch folks would joke about when they've been subscribed to a streamer for 9 months. So, I mean, just how much longer do you want to wait? Because the news is popping up with cases here and there of people that waited too long and they got it. and it was too late. In one case, this lady who did a "don't make the same mistakes I did" video on TikTok, who passed away from COVID shortly afterwards, she had her vaccine appointments. She just caught the virus before she could get the shot. Look, we're spoiled here in America. Not only can we argue about stuff like this and have the luxury of doing so on the internet and actually get heard by lots of people all over the place, not only do we have all of this wonderful stuff, we live in a country that has a glut of vaccine supply. So much you can walk into rando pharmacies, just get it like that. Walk-ins only. So, earlier on in the rollouts, when there was less supply, you had problems with anti-vaxxers booking fake vaccine appointments to deny someone else the ability to get the appointment. Now that it's walk-ins, it's been rendered moot. This is one of the many ways, though, that it's a first world problem that we're making a big deal out of this. And that we're having this argument in the first place. But how many more people have to die unnecessarily? That's the thing. And who's it going to be? And how close are they going to be to you? Unless you're God or something, you don't know the answers to all of those. So you'd think that in a world where people actually had a little bit of use their brains a little, they'd want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. They'd want to move us forward into 2021 and not live forever in 2020. But sadly, there's some cultures, when you hear people talking about the pandemic, where that's exactly what they do. They mentally stay in 2020 and pretend the vaccine doesn't exist. They never bring it up. They don't talk about it. They talk about how terrible COVID is, blah, blah, blah. They talk about treatments. They might even talk about something like remdesivir or something like that. But they'll completely ignore the fact that we have a very easily accessible, effective, safe vaccine. And we have so much of it that you can walk into a random pharmacy and just get it like that. I can rattle off at least 3 or 4 different pharmacies. You can actually pick your shot, too. I remember when Dr. Fauci was like, take the first one you can get. Don't wait for a specific shot. You don't want to catch it while you're waiting for your favorite shot to become available. Yeah, well, that guidance is obsolete in America. You can pick your shot. There's vaccines.gov that you can use to find, who has what and go get whichever one you want. Whichever one you want, if you have a preference, or whichever one's the closest, or what have you. We have all these wonderful things here. The only thing that's still going to be a problem is if we talk ourselves out of using the tools we have available to fight this thing. And that's part of what happened to my cousin. So, a couple of very important things are going to happen as a result of all of this. And I made these decisions before President Biden rolled out the mandatory vaccination thing for employers with 100 or more employees. Losing my cousin hurt badly. This guy was a great guy. We could talk video games. We could talk RPG stuff. We could even talk historical stuff. Matter of fact, I think there was a time we actually talked English history and Scottish history together because we were researching family trees at the same time. But enough's enough. Especially when the numbers, CDC keeps numbers on vaccine confidence, so you can keep an eye on what percentage of the population is either vaccinated, wants to get vaccinated, it doesn't know if they want to get vaccinated, definitely won't, or definitely will not get it. So you can keep an eye on the shrinking percent of the population that is causing all the problems. The anti-vaxxers and their ilk. You can keep an eye on that. Watch it shrink. It's a very slow dashboard. It only updates monthly for jurisdictions. It's supposed to be weekly, but it's still only through August. I don't know when the CDC is going to run their Tableau update on that, but yeah, the numbers are out there, so you can keep your head on straight by realizing that it's just a small clique of loudmouths causing all the problems. The 80-20 rule. 80% of the drama comes from 20% of the people, except nationwide, we're not even talking 20% of the eligible adult population who's trying to spread anti-vaxxer nonsense. Just some loudmouths. They got a couple politicians in their back pocket in a few red states. But the movement, it's not an even fight. Majority of the country is vaccinated with at least one dose. And as Delta had its way with the South, even in the states where there were really low vaccination rates, people were scrambling to get shots because not everybody wants to go off the cliff with the train, so to speak. You know, some people came to their senses. Now, if we're talking the Bible Belt here, let's talk about that passage in the Bible that talks about people being saved as though escaping through the flames. This is kind of a secular version of that. But it shouldn't have to come to that. And there should not be lives like my cousin's ending abruptly because of stuff like this. So in light of what's going on and what happened with my cousin, I'm cutting ties with the remaining vaccine hesitant folks who still talk to me on social media on October 1st. Starting on October 1st, if I know somebody's vaccine hesitant, I don't associate with them. They're not an anti-vaxxer, doesn't matter. They're still part of the problem. I mean, if they have some medical condition or something that keeps them from receiving this shot, that's one thing, but that's a very small group of people. We actually have a repeat of this problem that happens in restaurants where people pretend they have food allergies that they don't in order to get food cooked a certain way. You know, the people that lie to the waitresses and whatnot about having food allergies so they get things prepared a certain way. And it eventually gets to the point where the wait staff might start second guessing whether food allergies are, you know, they don't want to run the risk of, you know, someone being adversely affected by food that they're allergic to. But when you have people pretending to have food allergies to get food cooked a certain way because they don't think it will be otherwise, that's just pathetically and insensitively selfish. But my cousin wasn't an anti-vaxxer. He was just suckered into being too vaccine hesitant literally for his own good. So it's not just, I mean, this isn't just about who believes what and who's on what side. This is about any form of normalization of a culture where putting yourself at risk is in any way considered acceptable. It's not just about who's for it and who's against it. It's about who's trying to pollute the middle ground, so to speak. Who's trying to normalize a culture where waiting until it's too late is a very distinct possibility for someone when it comes to the vaccines. Because even if you don't die from this thing, there's all kinds of other, look at long COVID, look at needing oxygen possibly the rest of your life. Kids, for example, if they smoke when they're teenagers, it can affect their lung size for the rest of their life. Yeah, we still don't know what getting this thing does if you get it when you're a kid. What does it do to your long-term, growth and development and stuff? Even if you recover from it, is there something we're going to have to see through studies years down the road? Say if you got COVID as a kid, maybe your lungs aren't as good when you're an adult or something like that. So it's all a giant, whatever what-if games you can play with the vaccine, you can play even bigger what-if games with the virus itself. And that's really the pattern you see if you look at, people worrying about side effects of the vaccine versus what you get when you get the virus. Is that what you get when you get the virus is often more extreme than anything you could have a very remote chance of getting with the vaccine. Time and again. But starting October 1st, I don't associate with the vaccine hesitant anymore. It's over. What happened to my cousin was enough. At the same time also, and this would have been a thing even if President Biden hadn't done what he's done, I would prefer companies with vaccine mandates over companies that don't have them. I want to be involved with, work for, and associate with people who've made up their mind that they're going to do the right thing. No quarter for the pathological liars and charlatans that are selling their snake oil and other garbage that's holding this country back. Fun time is over. Spectator mode is over. It's time to pick which team you're on. Because here's the ugly truth of this matter that goes beyond anything COVID related or whether or not you get COVID. The problems that this virus is causing for Western modern society that we enjoy are never going to go away either, so long as we don't deal with this thing. This also means, send vaccines, no strings attached, anywhere in the world that needs them. And I applaud President Biden trying to do that. He gets it. Think about, for example, the electronics problems we're having right now. Semiconductors are known for being a little, inflexible with ramp up and slow down and stuff like that. If you have, for example, workers at plants that make electronics and stuff suddenly all getting sick, and it disrupts supply chains and things like that, and the prices go all over the place and the availability goes all over the place, shipments are delayed and all kinds of other crap happens. This isn't just about you or your neighbor, your personal decision. It's an international world out there. There's a lot of things that you'd like to have that are going to require Delta or whatever variant floats around out there to not disrupt the supply chain of this, whatever you want to buy. So it's not even just about the health side of things anymore. I think all of civilization is at risk. All of the way we want to live our lives, not just like going out and doing things in public, is at risk because of this thing. So the people surrendering to the virus, so to speak, that are making excuses and spreading misinformation and prolonging this nonsense, they're prolonging the threats and the threats to our culture, the threats to the life we live, the markets and the state of the markets, all this other stuff. That's the other thing that this is all threatening. It's not just about health either. Even whether or not the electronics market ever gets back to normal. Now, just heard earlier today, some disheartened tech video creators, their views have plummeted on their tech videos. One of the reasons it keeps popping up on Twitter is people don't like being reminded of stuff they can't buy, like graphics card reviews and stuff. People don't like being reminded of stuff they can't buy. Well, if we ever want the supply chains to not be constantly getting disrupted by COVID, we're going to have to do something about COVID. So the answer is not to sit there sucking your thumb with a tube of horse paste. The answer is science and real solutions. Stuff we can build, engineer, and export, not waiting for the whole world to get natural immunity. Because what does it take in order to get vaccine immunity? Take this shot, go through some side effects here and there. Do you really want to run the risk of ending up on machines or dying just to get antibodies, which might not even be useful the next variant from now, as some folks in my family have found out? I think that's what vaccination is supposed to be about in the first place, so you don't have to hope you survive something in order to get some kind of immunity to it. And the technology has done so much for us. So it's not just, your health is responsibility number one here. Protecting yourself and others is important. But even aside from all the health stuff, the way you want to live your life is being affected by this thing. So it's not just about the health side of it. If this thing keeps disrupting supply chains, we're going to keep having problems like what we've been having. And what happens, for example, when the cost of cars gets too expensive, where if you're in an accident or something like that, or your car, the engine seizes in your car, now it is way more expensive to get another car. What does that mean in terms of work transportation for you? So I don't consider any prolonging of the pandemic to be acceptable. None. Last year, we didn't have a vaccine for this thing, and we suffered greatly for it. Now we do. So I'm not going to listen to any nonsense being peddled by people who want to pretend it's still 2020 instead of 2021. It's time to grow a spine and stand up to these people, especially when the majority of the country is vaccinated anyways. Hey, you know what? Before we close, let's just entertain a little what if here when it comes to the vaccine and possible negative side effects. Imagine if the conspiracy theorists were right and everybody who got the vaccine was going to die. Let's get extreme. You're looking at an extinction level event for the United States population. You're looking at the majority of the United States population being dead in a couple of years, or however long your conspiracy theory wants to peg it for. That will crash the economy. That will pretty much ruin the country. Because right now we got hundreds of millions of people all around. Now imagine if local economies and local businesses couldn't function because there just plain weren't enough people. Now and of course, dead customers aren't spending money. So if the conspiracy theorists were right and everyone who's vaccinated was going to end up dead, you're talking a civilization threatening event for the United States. What politician in their right mind would want to risk something like that? See how ridiculous this gets? Folks, quit being such tinfoil heads and get your freaking shots. So, October 1st, it's over for myself and the vaccine hesitant. It's not just about the anti-vaxxers anymore. It's about people that I'll talk with them about why they should get vaccinated, but I'm not looking the other way on people sitting there twiddling their thumbs while more people suffer and die, and they potentially put themselves at risk too. I'm not doing that. And so that's the true test for these people and talking about freedom. Does that extend to my freedom to decide I want to do the right thing about this thing and I want the pandemic to end? I don't want to prolong it, and I certainly don't want this giant mega Darwin event to South Dakota the entire country. Those of you who don't know, South Dakota pushed for herd immunity. They did nothing to try and mitigate the thing. And they have a much higher death count than similarly sized states as a result of that. And a lot of times you'll see South Dakota on maps at like COVID Act Now with good numbers. That's because the virus has made the rounds over and over again because they never did anything like lockdowns or anything else like that. So it's one thing when that happens in South Dakota, and now, of course, you're talking about the entire rest of the country having that happening. But fortunately, we've gotten enough shots in arms that the majority of the country is vaccinated at least a little. So yeah, get your vaccines if you haven't already. Vaccines.gov. We're blessed to live in a country where you can just pick whichever one you want and go get it if you have a preference. But I don't want to see any more instances like what happened to my cousin, because he's not the only one. The news is running stories of people that are in the same position as my cousin. They're not overt anti-vaxxers, but they get suckered into being vaccine hesitant just long enough for it to cost them in the long run. People, it's time to be smarter than that. Vaccine hesitant, you had months and so many doses going around. If people were going to start dropping all around you, they would have done so by now. Businesses, it's time to very seriously look at the cost structures involved in people snubbing the vaccine and start talking mandates. Start talking enforcing your private property rights and playing demographics and deciding who you want on your team. Do you want to keep people that are risky in terms of knocking your people out in quarantine because they won't get vaccinated? You know, don't let yourself be held hostage by bad people. Be able to train new people so that you're not stuck with somebody who could get everybody sick. And even if they don't end up in the hospital, the quarantine policy means they're all booted out right when you need them the most, because I've seen that this year. We've had situations where we're doing overtime in a normally sleepy part of the year. We've had situations where we've done overtime in a sleepy part of the year because someone was a little too close to somebody else. Someone carpooled with somebody and a bunch of people are out on quarantine. So with where I work, you don't have to actually get COVID to suffer the financial penalties of getting COVID. You'll get booted out in quarantine if you get so, I mean, it's good to wear a mask, you know, for things like colds and stuff, not just COVID. Good to wear a mask everywhere you go. So that way, you know, you don't get booted out of work on quarantine. So See, there's more to the story than that. And we're heading into the run-up to Christmas and all the holiday spending. Do you really want your ability to make money to pay for those Christmas presents being affected, to put it nicely, by needing to get sent home on quarantine because you exhibited symptoms of some sort that were on a list? Oh, yeah. The hotheads on the internet starting all the arguments. There's a lot they're not talking about. Most of it having to do with local reasons why somebody would want to wear a mask and get vaccinated. And it's not just the ones that the CDC is talking about. How's that for naivete, assuming everybody has the same reasons for getting vaccinated or not getting vaccinated? But I think I'm going to shut off the chat, despite people being nice, coming in with condolences and stuff like that, and shut off the comments as well. I'm not here to entertain any kind of discussions from the peanut gallery when this converts over to a video afterwards. Might even just do a spin-off video that chops out pretty much all of it. So I want to thank the folks for stopping by and saying, yes, my condolences. It's good to know there's some good people in this world somewhere that give a darn about something like this. But there's always two things we can do whenever these bad things happen. Maybe I'll leave the chat on, I don't know. So there's two things we can do when these bad things happen. We can either dwell on the problem sometimes way too long, or we can look for the answer. Look to move beyond it. Look to turn the page. See what we can learn from it. What can we learn from this? As terrible as it is, to lose one of the nicest, friendliest cousins that I've ever had at way too young of an age. Get vaccinated. Don't get vaccinated. Don't get suckered in being too vaccine hesitant for your own good. Talk with your doctor. Get serious. Talk with a pharmacist. Talk with anybody. No, talk with anybody who knows what they're talking about. But it's 2021, and we are pretty much 3/4 of the way through 2021, if you can believe that. It's time to pull your head out of 2020. We didn't have the vaccine last year. Now we do. It's time for people to stop pretending it doesn't exist or stop blowing it off. So, nothing exciting, I know. This whole discussion was nothing exciting. I don't have anything loaded in this either. No music, no fancy stuff, no start soon screens, nothing. Monetization off, blah, blah, blah. Because this to just be, just a quiet discussion about all of this. Yeah. I'm going to continue ESO with the Friday night, actually. I'm going to continue ESO with the whole memorial for my cousin. But yeah, it's time to get serious, folks, about moving beyond this crap. And that doesn't involve pretending it doesn't exist, like the people going to the sports games and other places that turn into little Delta parties. This crap has gone on long enough. People should not be losing loved ones over this. It's preventable. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Those of you that are still on the other team, it's time to change teams. Good night.